Emma had always thought her life was steady. She lived in Seattle, in a house that looked perfect from the outside. 2 stories, a small garden with roses she cared for, and wide windows that let in the cool light of the Pacific Northwest. Neighbors often told her how lucky she was. She had a husband with a good career, a son who was responsible and kind, and a home that many people would envy. But inside those walls, things didn't feel as perfect as they appeared. Her husband, Richard, was a man who had once been full of charm. When they married, he used to make her laugh with his easy jokes, surprise her with dinners, and hold her hand just because he felt like it. But after 22 years together, his love had become something like background noise. He wasn't cruel, not in the obvious ways. He was simply absent. Long hours at work turned into late nights, and late nights turned into weekends where he was too tired to talk. Over time, their conversations had become about bills, chores, or schedules, and little else. Emma didn't notice when the silence first grew between them. At first, it was just one quiet dinner. Then it became a habit. Soon, months passed without a real conversation about anything that mattered. She would sometimes watch him reading emails while she cleared the table, and she felt as if she had become invisible, a shadow moving through the house, unacknowledged. Their son Daniel was 24. He had finished college but was still living at home while saving money for his own place. He worked part-time at a local marketing firm and spent evenings in his room or with friends, but he was always respectful. Emma was proud of him. He had her kindness and Richard's determination. But even he had started to notice that his parents weren't the same. One evening, Emma stood by the kitchen window staring at the last streaks of sunlight. She didn't hear Daniel walk in until he spoke. "Mom," he said softly, "are you happy?" The question startled her. She turned quickly, trying to smile, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "Of course," she replied, but her voice cracked. Daniel tilted his head, watching her carefully. "You don't have to say that just for me," he said. "I can see it. You don't laugh as much anymore." Emma felt her throat tighten. She wanted to brush it off, to tell him she was fine, but something about his voice, gentle and honest, broke through her defenses. She sat down at the kitchen table, and he sat across from her. For the first time in years, she admitted out loud what she had only whispered inside her own head. "Sometimes I feel like I don't exist here. Your father and we're together, but it feels like we're miles apart." Daniel didn't rush to answer. He just listened. That simple act shook her more than anything. For years, she had been living beside a man who no longer really listened to her. Now here was her son, giving her the attention she had been craving, and it was both comforting and frightening at the same time. The days that followed carried a new kind of awareness. Emma started to notice how quiet the house truly was. Richard's footsteps came and went, but rarely did he stop to talk. Meals were eaten quickly, sometimes not even together. The house was filled with the sound of doors opening and closing, but not the warmth of voices. One Saturday morning, Emma was in the garden, pruning her roses. Daniel stepped outside with 2 cups of coffee, one for her. "You always forget to drink something when you're out here," he said with a smile. Emma laughed softly, taking the cup. It felt strange, being cared for in these small ways. "You sound more like the husband than your father does," she joked lightly, but as soon as the words left her mouth, she felt a pang of guilt. Daniel chuckled, not taking it too seriously, but deep inside, Emma felt something stir. Later that evening, Richard came home late again. He mumbled a tired hello and went straight to his office. Emma sat on the couch, her hands folded tightly in her lap, listening to the distant sound of typing. She thought about the years of birthdays, anniversaries, and late-night talks that had slowly disappeared. She wondered when exactly she had stopped feeling like a wife and started feeling like a guest in her own marriage. Daniel came downstairs, noticing her expression. "Do you want to watch something with me?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. They sat together in the living room, watching a movie. Emma didn't remember much about the film. It wasn't the story that mattered. It was the simple comfort of not being alone. She realized how much she missed that feeling. When the movie ended, Daniel looked at her and said, "You deserve to be happy, Mom." The words hit her harder than she expected. She wanted to tell him he was right, but the truth was complicated. She had built a life with Richard, given years of herself to the marriage. How could she admit out loud that it wasn't enough anymore? That night, lying in bed beside her husband, she stared at the ceiling. The distance between them felt physical, like a cold wall running down the middle of the mattress. Richard turned away, already asleep, while Emma lay wide awake. She thought of Daniel's words. She thought of her own loneliness. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself to wonder what would happen if something changed, if she stopped pretending everything was fine. The next morning, she looked at herself in the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't the young bride she once was, nor the laughing mother who used to chase Daniel in the park. She was older, wiser, and lonelier. She pressed her palms against the sink, whispering to herself, "Something has to change." She didn't know what that change would look like, but she knew the silence in the house had gone on too long. And deep inside, she feared that the only person who truly saw her anymore wasn't her husband. It was her son. The days after Daniel's questions stayed with Emma. She tried to push it aside, but his words kept echoing in her mind. "Are you happy?" It was as if he had touched a wound she didn't want to look at. Suddenly, everything she did, washing dishes, folding laundry, working in the garden, felt heavier. The silence in the house was louder than ever. Richard, as usual, left early and came home late. When he was home, he sat in front of his laptop or scrolled through his phone. He didn't notice Emma's distant expression or the fact that she barely spoke anymore. He simply existed beside her, like a roommate who had no time for small talk. Emma knew he wasn't a bad man. He provided, he was loyal in his own way, but he wasn't there, not in the way she needed. Daniel, however, was different. He started spending more time with her without being asked. He'd sit at the kitchen table while she cooked, talking about his job, his friends, or a new idea he had for the future. Emma found herself listening closely, smiling in ways she hadn't in a long time. His presence filled a space in her heart that had been empty for years. One rainy evening, while Richard was away on another business trip, Emma sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket. The drizzle tapped softly against the roof, and the air smelled of wet earth. Daniel stepped outside, carrying 2 mugs of tea. He handed one to her without a word and sat beside her. For a while, they simply listened to the rain. Emma broke the silence. "Sometimes I feel invisible in this house," she said softly. It was the first time she had said those words to anyone. Daniel didn't laugh it off, didn't tell her she was overthinking. He just looked at her with concern. "You're not invisible to me," he said. Something inside her shifted at those words. It wasn't just comfort. It was validation. She felt seen, and the feeling was so powerful that tears filled her eyes. She quickly turned away, pretending to sip her tea. Daniel noticed but didn't push her. His hand brushed against hers, a small, almost accidental gesture, but it made her heart beat faster. Emma pulled her hand back quickly, her chest tightening with guilt. She was his mother. She shouldn't feel this way. Yet the moment lingered in her mind long after the rain stopped. The following days moved faster, almost like life had changed its rhythm. Emma found herself looking forward to Daniel's company. She laughed at his jokes, shared stories from her past, and listened as he told her about his dreams. Richard never asked about those things anymore. Emma knew she was treading dangerous ground, but she couldn't stop herself. One afternoon, Daniel came home with a bouquet of flowers. "For you," he said simply. Emma blinked in surprise. "What's the occasion?" she asked. "No reason," he shrugged. "You deserve it." Emma's throat tightened. The last time she had received flowers was years ago, back when Richard still tried. She placed them in a vase, unable to stop smiling. The house, for once, felt alive. That night, Richard called to say he'd be staying an extra day on his trip. Emma's heart sank, though she wasn't sure if it was sadness or relief. When she told Daniel, he shook his head in frustration. "He doesn't realize what he has," he muttered. Emma looked at him, startled by the anger in his voice. "Daniel," she began, but he cut her off gently. "You deserve more, Mom." The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Emma didn't know how to answer. She went to bed restless, her mind racing. She thought of the flowers, the tea on the porch, the way Daniel looked at her as if she were important. She hated herself for craving it, but she couldn't deny it either. A few days later, Emma was in the kitchen, wiping down the counter. Daniel walked in, looking unusually serious. "Can I ask you something?" he said. Emma nodded, bracing herself. He hesitated, then asked, "Have you ever thought about leaving Dad?" Emma froze. The question was sharp, direct, and dangerous. "Daniel," she whispered, unsure how to respond. Emma could no longer ignore the storm inside her. Days were moving quickly, yet every small moment with Daniel seemed to slow time. A glance across the table, a shared laugh, even silence between them carried a weight she didn't want to name. She told herself it was just comfort, just attention she had been missing from Richard, but deep down she knew it was something more dangerous. Richard's distance only widened the gap. He missed another dinner, another weekend. Emma set the table for 3, but often only 2 plates were used. She ate quietly with Daniel while Richard's chair sat empty, a reminder of the love that used to be there, but wasn't anymore. Each night, when she cleaned away food untouched by her husband, the ache inside her grew. Daniel noticed. He became her support without even being asked. When she felt tired, he insisted she sit while he finished the dishes. When she seemed down, he found a way to make her laugh. He remembered details Richard had long forgotten. Her favorite tea, her favorite flowers, the way she liked the curtains open during rainy days. Emma told herself not to depend on him so much, but every gesture pulled her in closer. One evening, Richard forgot their anniversary. It wasn't just a date on the calendar. It was 22 years of marriage, yet he didn't call, didn't send a message, nothing. Emma tried to act like she didn't care, but when Daniel saw her quietly putting away the untouched cake she had bought, his expression hardened. The next day, he came home with a bouquet of lilies, her favorite. "You shouldn't have to remind anyone that you're worth celebrating," he said. Emma's eyes filled with tears. She wanted to hug him, to say thank you, but the emotions were too strong. She placed the flowers in water and whispered, "You don't know what this means to me." But Daniel did know. That was the problem. The bond between them deepened. Emma found herself waiting for him to come home, listening for the sound of his car in the driveway. She told herself it was innocent, but her racing heart betrayed her. She started avoiding mirrors because her reflection revealed a woman who was no longer just a mother. She was a woman longing to be seen, longing to be wanted. One night she was crying quietly in the kitchen. Richard had canceled yet another dinner, choosing work over family again. She thought no one could hear her, but Daniel walked in. He froze when he saw her tears, then crossed the room quickly. "Mom, what's wrong?" he asked. She tried to wave him off, but her voice cracked as she said, "I just don't know if I matter to him anymore." Daniel's face tightened. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You matter," he said firmly. His hand lingered there, warm and steady, and for a moment Emma felt something she hadn't felt in years, safe, cherished, cared for. She stepped back quickly, whispering, "Daniel, this isn't fair to you." But even as she said it, she knew she wasn't only protecting him, she was protecting herself. The next days were tense. Every word, every look seemed loaded with meaning. They both tried to act normal, but the air between them was thick. One evening, while Emma was folding laundry, Daniel leaned against the doorway, watching her. "You deserve to be happy," he said quietly. She looked up, meeting his eyes, and saw something there she had been avoiding. A mixture of guilt and longing. Her hands trembled as she placed the folded shirt aside. "Daniel," she began, but he cut her off gently. "I don't want to hurt you." "But I can't pretend I don't care more than I should." The words left her breathless. It was everything she had felt, but had been too afraid to say. Now that it was spoken, the boundary they had tried so hard to avoid was no longer hidden. It was right there, shining between them like a line in the sand. Emma felt dizzy. She wanted to run, but she also wanted to stay. She whispered, "This can't happen." Her voice shook, not because she didn't feel the same, but because she did. Daniel nodded slowly, his jaw tight. "I know, but it doesn't change how I feel." Then he walked away, leaving Emma standing there with her heart pounding in her chest. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She lay beside Richard, who was turned away, breathing deeply in sleep. The distance between them on the bed felt like an ocean. She stared into the dark, remembering Daniel's words. She hated herself for the warmth they gave her. She hated herself more for wishing Richard had said them instead. The following morning, Emma tried to bury the feelings under routine. She cooked, cleaned, watered the garden. But every time Daniel walked into the room, she felt it, the unspoken truth between them. Their eyes met, then quickly looked away. They both knew they had reached a point where things couldn't go back to what they were. One afternoon, Emma was in the garden trimming roses when Daniel joined her. He stood close, too close. She could smell his cologne, fresh and subtle. "Mom," he said softly, "I don't want to cross a line, but I can't stand watching you hurt." Emma dropped the clippers, her hands trembling. "You're making this harder," she whispered. He bent down, picked up the clippers, and handed them back to her. Their hands touched briefly, and the spark between them was undeniable. She turned away, her chest heaving. "This is wrong," she said. "I know," he answered. But neither of them moved. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Finally, Emma whispered, "If we don't stop now, we'll regret it forever." Her voice was desperate, pleading with herself as much as with him. Daniel didn't reply. He just looked at her with an expression she would never forget. Half love, half sorrow. That night, Emma stood by her bedroom window, watching the rain slide down the glass. She felt like she was living in two worlds. In one, she was a wife bound to a man who no longer saw her. In the other, she was a woman seen too clearly by someone she should never lean on. The line between right and wrong was no longer far away. It was beneath her feet, fragile, cracking, and she knew that the next choice she made would decide everything. Emma lay in bed that night, her heart racing as the storm of thoughts refused to let her sleep. Richard was beside her, turned away, lost in his own world as always. She could hear his steady breathing, but it gave her no comfort. Instead, she felt trapped, caught between the man she had promised her life to and the son who had given her back the feeling of being seen. She stared at the ceiling, asking herself over and over, "What am I doing? What am I becoming?" The truth frightened her. Daniel had awakened something inside her that she had buried for years. It wasn't just loneliness, it was desire for attention, care, and connection. He gave her warmth, while Richard gave her absence. But she knew the cost of giving in. One step too far and everything would break beyond repair. By morning, her decision was clear. She couldn't allow this to go on. She couldn't let herself cross a line that would destroy both Daniel and herself. When she entered the kitchen, Daniel was already there, sitting at the table with his coffee. His eyes lifted to hers, searching, waiting. The silence between them was thick, but Emma forced herself to speak. "You've given me something I thought I lost," she said softly, her voice trembling. "You reminded me that I still have a heart, but this can't be ours to share." Daniel's jaw tightened. His eyes glistened with emotion, but he nodded slowly. "I know," he whispered. "I don't want to make your life harder." Tears stung Emma's eyes. She reached out, touching his hand just for a moment. "You've helped me more than you'll ever understand," she said. "But I need to face the truth, with your father, with myself. That's the only way forward." For a long time they sat in silence, their hearts heavy but their decision made. The bond between them didn't vanish, but it shifted into something safer, something that couldn't cross the boundary. Later that day, Emma waited for Richard to come home. She rehearsed her words again and again. She was terrified, but she knew she couldn't stay silent anymore. When he finally walked through the door, weary from work, she stood in the living room and faced him. "Richard," she said firmly, "we need to talk." He looked surprised. "Can it wait? I've had a long day." "No," Emma replied. Her voice was stronger than she expected. "It can't wait anymore," Richard sighed, setting his briefcase down. "What is it?" Emma's hands trembled, but she held her ground. "Do you even see me anymore? Do you even realize how long it's been since you've asked how I feel, what I need, who I am? We live in the same house, but I've never felt so alone. Richard frowned, clearly caught off guard. Emma, I work hard for this family. You know that? It's not about providing, she interrupted. Her voice broke, but she pushed on. It's about being here. Being with me. Do you remember the last time we celebrated an anniversary? The last time you brought me flowers? The last time you looked at me like I mattered? Her words hung in the air, sharp and raw. Richard looked away, guilt flickering in his eyes. For the first time in years, he seemed to realize the depth of what he had ignored. I didn't know you felt that way, he admitted quietly. Because you stopped listening, Emma said. I can't keep living like this. Something has to change. Either you start seeing me again, or we need to face what this marriage has become. The conversation stretched late into the night. There were tears, raised voices, and long silences. Richard confessed he had lost himself in work, thinking that providing was enough. Emma admitted she had felt invisible for years. The truth was painful, but it was honest, and honesty was something their marriage hadn't seen in a long time. In the days that followed, Richard tried in small ways to repair what was broken. He came, "Hey!"